In the frozen silence of the far north, a shadow moved through the darkness, and even entire kingdoms trembled at its distant steps. In these ruthless northern lands, each breath carried the taste of danger and death. And from this harsh cradle, the Northmen were ultimately born. To their enemies, they seemed like demons of winter, relentless and unstoppable. But in truth, they were a people carved by hunger, ice, and unbroken will. Stay with me on this journey as we lift the veil from a world forged in ice and carried through centuries by myth and memory. The Vikings were, above all, children of a land that demanded endurance, giving nothing freely except the chance to survive. Cold was their earliest teacher, shaping their every instinct, and survival became their very first unspoken prayer. Lay where winter ruled far longer than sunlight, a world where only the strongest endured long enough to become legends. They were not born warriors alone. Many were farmers, sailors, craftsmen, until life demanded they rise in momentary storms of fury. They were not monsters as tales once claimed, just survivors of a merciless world, driven by necessity, hardened by endless hardship. And among them walked our silent companion, a Northman lost to history. Yet through him, their world becomes clear and deeply human. The Viking heart followed the rhythm of unending seasons. Hunt, build, endure, and begin all over again. They honored their gods not from dread or trembling fear, but from deep respect for a world demanding constant strength. The old sagas tell us the gods watched them closely, amused by their courage and humbled by their constant endurance. From youth, they learned to shape tools with steady hands, forging their own fate with every swing. In their villages, wisdom passed quietly from hand to hand, every movement carrying lessons older than memory. The North demanded unity above all else, for a single weakness could doom an entire clan. Strength alone meant little without discipline, and discipline carried more weight than sharpened steel. They rose each dawn not to conquer or claim, but simply to survive another unforgiving day. Their meals were simple: bread, fish, and mead, hard-earned rewards after battles with nature itself. When storms approached, they listened closely, for the sky was scripture written in thunder. Their homes were simple but enduring shelters, crafted from stubborn hope and unyielding will. Inside these walls, life remained harsh yet warm, held together by family, duty, and survival. They did not fear death as others did, only the terror of fading into silence. Yet through their sagas, they'd found immortality, stories carried far beyond frozen shores. To truly understand the Vikings, we must know their world, a land that forged steel into every soul, a world where endurance defined glory itself, and courage remained the only lasting currency. Here, within this raw beginning, their great saga awakens, a tale older than any surviving kingdom. But to know who they truly were, we must step deeper into their living world of ritual and belief. And there, beyond the edge of fear and silence, their most authentic identity begins to reveal itself. Come with me now, for beyond this threshold lies the everyday world of the Viking people. Not myth or rumor, but truth, etched into the bones of the North. To understand the Vikings beyond their battles, we must enter their daily world. A world shaped by hearthfire, hunger, and unbroken tradition. Their homes were modest structures of timber and turf. Yet inside them, life moved with purpose and unspoken discipline. Longhouses sheltered entire families and their animals. Warmth, shared among many, was the only shield against endless cold. Inside these walls, life unfolded in rituals of work. Each task vital, each motion a fragment of survival. The clothes of the Vikings were not crafted for beauty alone. They were armor against a land designed to break the unprepared. Wool, linen, and furs wrapped their bodies in layered resilience. A second skin woven from necessity itself. Color was rare but meaningful. Dyes signaled wealth, trade, and distant connections. Their meals were born from land and sea. Simple foods, sustaining bodies hardened by relentless work. Bread baked from barley and rye filled their mornings, its warmth a treasured rarity on colder days. Stews simmered slowly, mixing root vegetables and salted meat. A humble feast after long hours under northern skies. Mead, sweet, golden, and ancient, lifted spirits in harshest winters. Life was not quiet, but purposeful. Every hand devoted to the endless struggle to endure. They forged their days with steady rhythm, a heartbeat of work echoing through every settlement. To the Vikings, the world was alive. Every storm, river, and stone carrying the breath of the gods. They believed fate was woven long before birth, yet courage allowed a man to shape how he met it. Offerings to the gods were humble gestures, grain, carved wood, or a simple whispered breath. Rituals marked the seasons, life and death flowing in endless cycles. Viking society was built on honor, law, and responsibility, a structure firmer than the ice beneath their feet. Their laws were spoken, remembered, recited. Justice carried by memory, not ink. Disputes were settled through reasoning or challenge, a balance between wisdom and warrior pride. Women held power through knowledge and skill. Their hands preserved life when storms clawed at every door. They managed farms, crafted clothing, and guided households, their strength equal to any sword on the battlefield. In sagas, shield maidens stood beside men, proof that courage needed no single shape. Every soul in a settlement carried weight, each failure or triumph echoing through the whole. Their unity was not chosen lightly. It was carved from necessity and bound by trust. Children grew quickly in the north. Playful moments, brief between lessons of endurance. They learned the value of work early, each task shaping their place within the clan. Family formed the backbone of Viking life. Threads woven tightly through hardship and hope. But behind this humble world lay a restless spirit, a hunger for exploration that stirred like storms above the sea. For soon, the Northmen would push beyond these quiet shores, and the world would learn their name through fire and salt water. The quiet world of the North did not remain quiet for long. A growing hunger stirred within its people, urging them toward distant horizons. Harsh winters, rising populations, and limited farmland pushed the Vikings outward, not in conquest at first, but in desperate search of opportunity. They turned their gaze toward the sea, a shifting, unpredictable path that promised both fortune and death. For the sea was the Vikings' greatest teacher, and in time, it became their greatest weapon. The longship changed everything, light, fast, and fearlessly crafted. capable of cutting through oceans or gliding silently up shallow rivers. With these vessels, the Northmen could travel farther in days than most kingdoms moved in seasons. Their world expanded with every tide, each new shore a question waiting to be answered. Some left in hope of trade, others in search of fertile land, but a few sought something far more dangerous: glory. For in the sagas, a man lived forever only through bold deeds, and the sea offered endless chances to carve a name into legend. And so, the Vikings stepped aboard their longships, not knowing if they would return, yet driven by the promise of fate. Their first journeys were not attacks, but tests, voyages meant to measure the world beyond their icy borders. They reached coastlines richer than their own, and discovered monasteries unguarded, wealthy, and utterly unprepared. The world had never seen warriors who arrived from the sea, swift as storms, silent as shadows. And in a single morning, history changed, with a strike so sudden it echoed for generations. The raid on Lindisfarne became legend, a moment that announced the start of the Viking Age. To the Northmen, it was survival and opportunity. To the world, it was terror unlike anything known. News of their speed and ferocity spread quickly, fear traveling faster than any messenger. Villages fortified their walls, kingdoms whispered in dread, for the Northmen had awakened something unstoppable. And yet, to the Vikings, these raids were only beginnings, a small spark before the great storm. For with every returning longship came wealth, and the promise of more across endless horizons. Their ambitions grew with each voyage, their eyes now set on greater lands and richer kingdoms. The sea no longer scared them. It became a road paved with opportunity. And as their skill grew, so did their confidence, a force more dangerous than any blade. Europe trembled as the longships multiplied, each one carrying men forged in hardship. And so began an age of raids, an age that reshaped nations and carved new legends. But among these countless warriors, a few rose above the rest, names so powerful they survived 1,000 winters. For soon, we will meet the giants of this age, men whose deeds shaped the world far beyond their homelands. The North remembers their names still, etched into stone, carved into saga, carried by the breath of centuries. Yet within these rising tides of battle and ambition, whispers began to spread. Rumors of men whose deeds burned brighter than the northern flames, waiting for their moment to stride into legend. For soon, from the shadows of this violent age, extraordinary figures will rise. Warriors, explorers, poets, and kings whose names carved the very spine of Viking history. Their stories begin just beyond this moment. In the chaos of raids and rising kingdoms, stories were born, and from those stories, legends rose like mountains through the northern mist. These were not ordinary men. They were sparks that set the world on fire. Warriors, dreamers, wanderers, and poets whose names refused to die. Tonight, we walk across time itself to stand face to face with the giants of the Viking Age. And our journey begins with the man whose shadow shaped centuries, a name whispered long after kingdoms turned to dust. Here stands Ragnar Lothbrok, farmer, raider, king, and myth. A man who looked at the endless sea and saw a doorway instead of a prison. He led not with fear, but with certainty. A calm in his voice that could steady even the wildest hearts. Ragnar believed the world was larger than anyone dared imagine, and he would either reach it or die chasing it. In his wake, kingdoms trembled, For no wall could stop a man who refused to fear the horizon. And yet, beneath the legend, he was human, torn between the soil he worked and the storms he commanded. But even legends cast shadows, and from Ragnar's shadow rose a mind feared across continents. His son, Ivar the Boneless, was unlike any warrior the world had seen. He possessed no fear, no hesitation, only calculation. His body held weakness, but his mind held empires. Every battle was a puzzle to him, every enemy a piece to be moved. Some called him cruel, others called him cursed, but all feared the cold fire in his eyes. To him, chaos was an instrument, and war a language he spoke fluently. But not all great Vikings forged their names in blood. Some carved their legacy into the edges of the world itself. This is Eric the Red, the fire-bearded wanderer, driven not by war, but by exile, fury, and discovery. He was banished, yet he refused to disappear. He sailed toward a rumor, a land of ice and silence. In waters where storms were born, he found a new world, harsh, merciless, breathtaking. Others saw desolation. He saw possibility. And on that distant frozen shore, a piece of Viking destiny took root. But the sagas hold more than kings and explorers. They hold storms wearing human form. Behold Egil Skallagrimsson, warrior, poet, sorcerer, a man feared on the battlefield and feared even more when he picked up a pen. He could crush a skull in anger or break a heart with a single verse. In him lived the Vikings' duality, rage and artistry, darkness and brilliance. And then came Grace, Gunnar Hamundarsson, the unmatched swordsman whose movements flowed like water and struck like lightning. They said none could stand before him, and that even death hesitated to face him. These were the North's shining stars and darkest storms, the men who shaped an age with fire, ice, and fate. But even legends cannot outrun time. The Viking Age, like winter, began to fade. Their stories would outlive every kingdom they touched, and now we watch how the age of iron and storm finally came to an end. Every age ends not with thunder, but with silence. For the North, that silence began with a long, slow winter. For centuries, they reshaped the world. But even the fiercest warriors cannot outrun time. And before the era fades completely, there are truths the world must finally remember about the Vikings. First truth: Vikings were not filthy. They bathed weekly, far more than most Europeans of their age. And no Viking ever wore a horned helmet. That myth was born centuries later, on an opera stage. Their greatest wealth was not gold, but people. Slavery powered their economy from Ireland to Russia. Viking women held rights rare for their time. They owned land, led households, and some even fought. Their longships were masterpieces, fast, flexible, and light enough to carry over land. Not all Vikings were blonde. Many bleached their hair using a lye-based soap. They were farmers before they were raiders. Most battles happened only in harsh seasons, but beneath the soil, their spirits still burned. They wrote poetry, love verses, war songs, and sagas that still survive today. They came from Norway, Denmark, Sweden, but settled from Iceland to the Middle East. They navigated oceans using sunstones, crystals revealing the sun's position through clouds. Some warriors fought in a trance-like fury, the berserkers, feared even by their own. Some carved lines into their teeth, a terrifying sight when they roared in battle. In Iceland, they built one of Europe's first legal systems, settling disputes not by blood, but by law. Contrary to myth, we're not short. Most Viking men stood as tall as modern Europeans. They drank mead, sweet honey wine. Every victory, every sorrow shared in its warmth. But soon, mead halls grew quiet. Raids faded. Longships rested. The Viking Age did not end in battle. It ended in transformation. The world changed, and the North learned to change with it. But their spirit, unyielding, fearless, restless, never left us. In every explorer, every wanderer, every dreamer of distant horizons, a Viking heartbeat still echoes. And though their ships rot, their stories do not. This is not the end of the North, only the end of this telling. So before we part, one last breath from their world. Thank you for standing with me through this journey. This film was crafted with passion, shaped with care, and offered to you with all the heart behind its creation. Your presence keeps this adventure alive. Together, through the power of the storytelling and artificial intelligence, we will continue rebuilding the past, one breathtaking scene at a time. You deserve the best. Thank you for staying to the very end.